Checo's time with Racing Point is officially coming to an end at the conclusion of the 2020 F1 season. This will end the driver's 7-year stint with the team that he not only helped build, but helped stay in F1 when they faced adversity in 2018 during a transition from Force India to Racing Point. The harsh reality of Formula One is that no job is ever safe, and now Sergio Pérez's future in F1 is in question as he begins the search for a new seat for the 2021 season. Several realistic options might be available for next season, and some dream options also might be a possibility. However, at 30 years of age, there is also a chance that Checo decides to leave Formula One for another form of racing at this stage in his career. In this video, I will look at all of his options and why I think there are some seats in Formula One that are a great match for both driver and team. Let's take a look. Alright, so taking a look at Sergio Pérez, 30 years old. He's been with Force India Racing Point for 7 seasons. In that time, he had 5 podiums, 486 points, 9 retirements, but none in 2016. 86 times in the points out of 129 Grand Prix. That's 67% of the time in the points. But he also had 3 races that he did not start, 2 because of the COVID positive test. So if you take those into account, 68% time of races that he starts, he finishes in the points. World Driver Championship, during those 7 seasons, 10th or better every single season, with his best 7th, which he achieved twice. This season he sits in 11th place, just outside of that 10th, but again he missed 2 races. So the way I have my board set up here, I've got the most likely seats that I think he would fit well into in Formula One. And then, of course, I have the 3rd or 4th option that I think would be a great fit for Sergio. Starting over at HAAS. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare Sergio Pérez to the 2 drivers at HAAS, the 2 drivers at Alfa Romeo, and just Alex Albon at Red Bull, because there's no chance of Max Verstappen losing that seat. And these are the 3 teams that we've kind of heard there's a chance Sergio Pérez might fit well into. So let's take a look. Comparing him to Romain Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen first. Romain Grosjean's 34 years old, 4 years older than Sergio Pérez. And I'm going to compare from 2017 on because that's how long the current Haas lineup has been together. So in that time, Grosjean, his best finish in the driver standings is 13th place. Since 2017, he scored 73 points, 18 times in the points as well since 2017. Versus Kevin Magnussen, who's 27 years old, a few years younger than Sergio Pérez. Magnussen, his best finish in the standings, 9th place, and 96 points since 2017, 21 times in the points during that duration. Versus Checo. Checo, from 2017 on, his best finish in the points, 7th, I should say, in the World Driver standings. 248 points during that same time, 46 times in the points since 2017. Definitely outperforming the 2 Haas drivers during that duration. Of course, there is the difference between teams. So in 2017, Haas with 47 points, Force India with 187. In 2018, that's the closest year that we're going to get to compare. 93 points for Haas, 105 points for Force India Racing Point. That's taking into consideration the points they earned as Force India. Force India lost all their points when they changed their name, of course, but overall that year they had 105 points between their 2 drivers. 2019, 28 points for Haas, 73 points for now Racing Point. And of course this season the Ferrari-powered units are not doing too well. Haas with just a single point, whereas Racing Point looks fantastic with 82 points. So definitely a little bit of discrepancy, of course, when you're comparing Sergio Pérez versus the Haas drivers. But that said, this for me is the best seat that Sergio Pérez can go into in Formula One next year. Maybe not specifically for 2021, of course, but I think this is a match made in heaven for both driver and team, and that's why it's the title of this video. I think there's a great opportunity for Haas to take a look at one of these drivers. It's time to make a change there. I've done other videos on that. Things aren't going well at Haas before the Ferrari power units, and now they're just really bad. I believe, in my opinion, that I have stated in other videos, that it's time to maybe move on from Romain Grosjean. He's done a lot for that team. He gives a lot of great feedback and a lot of good driver information. I understand all of the arguments for Romain Grosjean being in the Haas seat. But I think if you take a look at the way that team is trending, the way things have gone there, and some of the the difficulties that Romain Grosjean's had over the last couple seasons. For me, I'd really like to see that team go in a different direction, and I think you could not go in a better direction than bringing in someone like Sergio Perez. Nico Hulkenberg's another driver you could also bring in, but I think Sergio Perez would be a fantastic fit for the Haas team. It would be a little tough for him to go from Racing Point to Haas next year because they're going to struggle again next year. But when you look at all the things that Checo brings to the table here, these are things that can benefit Haas so well. And if they can, in turn, maybe give a little bit of a longer-term commitment, maybe a 3 or 4 year deal for Checo, it's something that could really benefit him as well. And by the time we get to 2022 with those new cars, I think Sergio Perez is the type of driver that could really help Haas climb up those standings and be getting points. Because that's what he is. He's a point machine, right? So 86 times in the points and really 126 races, that type of experience and being able to get that extra out of the car is something that could benefit Haas moving forward absolutely greatly. And I think that's a match made in heaven. That's where I think Sergio Perez should sign next year. And I think it should be in place of Romain Grosjean. Although if they kept Grosjean and got rid of Magnussen, you'd have two drivers that have a fair amount of experience there. But I think Magnussen's age for me is a bigger upside, and I believe that he's been out racing Romain Grosjean for a couple seasons now. So for me, Grosjean leaving, Perez replacing him, that's the absolute best case scenario for both team and driver, I think, moving forward. But the team we keep hearing the most about is Alfa Romeo. And so let's take a look at Alfa Romeo. We'll get the points out of the way. Alfa Romeo in 2019, 57 points to Racing Point's 73. And in 2020, it's not close. 80 points ahead are Racing Point to the 2 points that Alfa Romeo's had, with Giovinazzi's one time in the points this season. So the two drivers we'd be looking at here, Kimi Räikkönen, Antonio Giovinazzi. Räikkönen is 40, so there's a 10-year difference already in these two drivers. So I think realistically, if we're talking about replacing someone in Alfa Romeo, it's probably going to be Kimi Räikkönen that they would be moving. Kimi Räikkönen's best finish in the points, I'm looking from 2019 on because that's the current lineup that we'd be replacing at Alfa Romeo with Checo. So in that time, Räikkönen finished 12th in his first season with Alfa Romeo last season. 43 points since 2019, 9 times he's finished in the points, though he has not finished in the points in 2020. Again, this is a Ferrari-powered unit, so there's going to be some issues this season with getting in the points. But Antonio Giovinazzi, 26 years old, again an upside on the age there, even more than Checo, so I think it's going to be harder to move him. World Driver Championship last year, his first time, 17th, not a great season, but he has looked much improved this year, to his credit. 16 points total since 2019, 5 times in the points total in his career with Alfa Romeo, and 2 points in 2020 so far, as they've only finished in the points 1 time as a team. He has a very good record of passing at least 1 car on every opening lap of a Grand Prix. That's a pretty good one there. So compared to Checo since 2019, Checo finished 10th in the points during that time. 86 points total he's collected with Racing Point. 17 times in the points since 2019. Again, these numbers are going to be way bigger because Racing Point is so far up the standings compared to where Alfa Romeo is during that same time, especially in 2020. But if you're just looking at straight up stats, again, Checo outperforming both those drivers. The reason why I think Haas is a better fit, though, Raikkonen's age is a problem, but it's not a problem. And what I mean by that is he's 40 years old, Sergio's 30, there's a 10-year difference, there's much more upside on age, and eventually the end of the road is going to happen for Kimi Räikkönen. But I've done a video on my channel about this as well, you can check it out if you would like, of why I think Kimi Räikkönen is totally deserving of a seat in Formula 1. And my issue here is, I believe in my heart that Sergio Perez can bring something to Haas that Grosjean and Magnussen can't. I think he's an improvement there. That's my personal opinion. If you bring him in there, you are upgrading your driver lineup. I don't know that I can say that even with the age difference to Kimi Räikkönen. Räikkönen might be 40, but he's a multiple-time champion, or he's a champion in Formula 1, I should say. And to me, he's. I don't know that you're getting more out of the car if you bring in Perez over Räikkönen. That's kind of the main point I'm trying to make. I don't know that Sergio Perez is the difference maker at Alfa Romeo. I think Kimi Räikkönen is still good enough to be getting just as much out of that car as Checo would. And that's, maybe Checo's got a little more experience than a Räikkönen at racing at mid to backfield. But Räikkönen's looked pretty good, and I think he's getting the most out of that car that he can get this year. So I don't really agree with bringing in Checo over Räikkönen unless Räikkönen is saying that he wants to retire. Different story in that case, but so far it doesn't seem like that's the case. And and I don't know that you move Kimi Räikkönen out of that team in favor of Checo. And when it comes to Giovinazzi, it's the age. He's barely in the Formula One right now. He's shown improvements from last season, great improvements in my opinion, with a worse car than he had from last year. So for me, that says a lot about his character and his abilities. He's been kind of unnoticed this year because of being in the back of the pack so much. But at 26 years old, that's pretty harsh to bring in a 30-year-old driver to replace him. And yeah, I think Checo in this case might be able to get a little more out of the car than Giovinazzi, but I think this is a driver that is still going to be okay, and I think he's still developing. He's not as young as you'd like him to be, maybe like a 22 or 23-year-old to be developing, but I don't know that you bring in Sergio Perez to replace Giovinazzi after just one season, really. So, for me, I think Haas is a better fit than there. The dream scenario, of course, if you're a Sergio Perez fan, would be taking the second seat at Red Bull, and right off the bat, I'm just going to come right down to this part of the board. It's not realistic. It's awesome to talk about. It's a lot of fun to think about. And I think that Checo would be amazing in that number 2 ride in Red Bull. A ride that so far we've seen between Pierre Gasly and Alex Albon is a very difficult second ride to get everything out of that car in, behind Max Verstappen. If there's any driver in the Formula One grid that I think could absolutely be that driver, it's Checo. He's done it in numerous other teams now, through all of his time at Force India and Racing Point. I have no issues believing that Checo would be able to be a great second driver at Red Bull. That's not going to happen, and you'll have to forgive me. I did not put the points up for Red Bull and versus Racing Point, but they're close this year. They sit 3rd and 4th overall in the point standings right now. Scratch that, 2nd and 4th. Red Bull is 2nd, and Racing Point is 4th this year. So they're close in standings, not in points. Red Bull's way ahead in points. And in 2019, it was not close. Red Bull was way, way ahead of Racing Point. So just comparing that, we're looking at Alex Albon, obviously, as the driver we would be replacing at Red Bull in this case. Albon's only 24 years old, finished 8th in the World Driver Championship, 140 points in 2019, or since 2019, I should say. 19 times in the points since 2019. That includes a small stint at Toro Rosso to begin last season. By comparison, Checo, 10th, so two places behind Albon and a little worse equipment, and 17 times in the points. Again, a little bit worse equipment last year, maybe not so much this year. That second seat, Racing Points look like it's been better than that second seat Red Bull this year. But overall, I don't see how you could possibly replace Alex Albon at 24 years old with a 30-year-old Sergio Perez, and then turn around and look at someone like Pierre Gasly and say he doesn't deserve that seat first. I think that the Red Bull Formula One team is built around their academy. I don't think any non-academy driver has made it in the Red Bull since the beginning. They built that academy for a reason, and for me, the academy is deep. There's a lot of drivers that you could bring up to this driver from the academy, but first and foremost, I don't think Albon should lose a seat yet. I think he needs to be given a proper chance at Red Bull, and if you are going to promote someone, how do you not promote Pierre Gasly? He's a Grand Prix winner, he's podiumed, 2 things Albon hasn't done. You can check out my channel, I have basically multiple videos on Gasly versus Albon at this point. So, for me, this does not make any sense to bring in Checo, except that it would be fun for the fans to watch, and an awesome opportunity for Sergio. But I think it would be a huge red flag from Red Bull management and their academy if they were to make that move. So for me, that is not realistic. Which brings me to the final thing that I need to talk about, and that's the possibility that 30 years old Sergio Perez could leave Formula One in favor of another championship or form of motorsport. And the one that comes to mind for me that makes a lot of sense for Checo, if he is going to move on from Formula One, is, of course, the IndyCar series in North America. Many Formula One drivers have made this jump recently. Obviously, Fernando Alonso chasing the Triple Crown in the Indy 500. But Marcus Ericsson, Rossi, Sato, obviously Juan Pablo Montoya, a huge one to move on to IndyCar. These are all drivers that have either moved on because their opportunity in Formula One came to an end, like a Marcus Ericsson, or because they're chasing the dream of racing in IndyCar, which does bring 2 things with it. A chance at the Indy 500, and a little bit more parity, which I've also done a video on, in that series. It is a much closer series with a lot more opportunity to win podium on any given weekend with a lot of different teams. So it's a great opportunity to really show your driving skill. And, these cars are a little bit harder to drive than Formula One cars are, and it's becoming a very popular series, and that's why I have a little asterisk here. How popular has IndyCar been getting, and it's been gaining momentum over the last 4 or 5 seasons, so much so that 7-time NASCAR Cup champion Jimmy Johnson, who was given an opportunity to stay in his 48 Chevrolet ride with Hendrick Motorsports in NASCAR to run one more season next year because of coronavirus. He hasn't really been able to have a farewell tour. He's one of, if not the greatest driver in the history of NASCAR, and he said no thanks. And he said, I'm signing a 2-year deal to go run IndyCar starting in 2021. So NASCAR's losing its arguably biggest star in their sport right now, who was planning on retiring, but not because he wanted to retire from racing, because he wanted to go drive in IndyCar. There's a lot of opportunity there, and it's a sport that is starting to grow and gain momentum again, that we haven't seen in like 20, 30 years in whether it be IndyCar or kart in North America. And it's going to be a lot of fun to see Jimmy Johnson there. Sergio Pérez would be an extraordinarily popular driver in that series. I mean, it wouldn't even be questioned. I think he'd be one of the top, most popular drivers right off the bat. You also have the proximity to Mexico. It's a North American series overall. And with the storylines like Jimmy Johnson coming in next year, if Sergio Perez found his way in IndyCar in 2021, I think that it might shoot up to being the most popular form of motorsport in at least North America and the United States, pretty much right off the bat because of Checo joining and Jimmy Johnson. So those are my 3 to 4 options I think that are realistic. For me, I would love to see him join Haas on like a 3 or 4 year deal. I think it's such a good fit for Checo. Again, next year he would struggle, but moving forward with those new cars, I think it's a great opportunity, and I think it would really help Haas out. I really think bringing in a driver like Sergio Perez is just a match made in heaven between those two teams. But again, Alfa Romeo has been talked about a lot, seems to be the popular choice when you listen to the commentators, and of course, a lot of the fans are going to be wishing, hoping, and dreaming that he finds his way into that second spot at Red Bull, but I just don't think it's very realistic. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Where do you think Sergio Perez is going to wind up in 2021? Do you want to see him stay in Formula One in a maybe a worse ride than Racing Point, Aston Martin next year? Would you like to see him in IndyCar if you're a North American fan? Do you think that would be a lot of fun seeing him go against Scott Dixon and Jimmy Johnson next year? As always, if you like my video, please give me a like. Consider giving me a subscribe. I am very appreciative of everyone who watches my videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.